the only problem is that you met only the top of my head. And so the reason for meeting today is so you can see the rest of me. And can you?
Yes.
Good. It's a good beginning. Well, I'm going to start out with an apology. First of all, I'm 97 years old. I apologize for that. But I take the full responsibility. Don't blame your parents for everything. And for that reason, I have difficulty hearing. And it's particularly difficult for me to hear high-pitched voices, which, it is your good fortune to be born with as women, but I have a little more difficulty with hearing your voice. So I have to ask you if you could speak as slowly as possible. Also going to ask you to excuse me. I'm going to have to look at my notes. Of course, at 97, I can remember all the terrible things people did to me in my life, but none of it good. So I am going to need to refer to these notes in order to stay on track. At any rate, this course, you are taking this course for the first time in the 20-year history of the school. And the reason for that is, and at the end of this talk, I'm going to ask you for your evaluations of it in different parameters, is that the school is known for something called contemporary Oriental medicine, which is sort of something that developed over the last 20 years. It's been incorporated in a number of books that you probably be asked to look at. But it is essentially the only school, at least in this part of the world, that is teaching this curriculum. And the curriculum is begun always in the second year. There are now reinstated 7 courses, and not including the pulse, which I think they begin to teach in the first year, which is a part of the common curriculum. So the reason for introducing this course and introducing it to you is that in the first year, primarily you're going to be learning the nuts and bolts of Chinese medicine, which is called in this country TCM, which means traditional Chinese medicine. And if we have time, I will try to give you a little bit more insight what that means. Today in China, they do not use the term traditional Chinese medicine, nor do they teach traditional Chinese medicine. Now they're getting closer to what is known as classical Chinese medicine. Now, by the end of the first year, because you have been studying what we call TCM, you have become TCM practitioners, which is very different from what I would like you to know, though it's the nuts and bolts are here in the first year. These are important things for you to know. Essentially, the question always is, when I give one of these erudite speeches, somebody always raises their hand and said, yeah, okay, that's fine. He said, but where do you put the needle? I mean, what? The needle? But that's not what I'm an expert at. But at any rate, the object is that at the end of the first year, we will have learned a great deal about where to put the needle, which is essential. You will become that kind of a practitioner who is just interested in knowing where do I put the needle. And introducing my concepts called calm. In the second year is a little on the late side. So, we have been listening to people talk about, and you've been reading what I've written. That has to do with diagnosis and prevention and so on and so forth, which is, I consider to be more central in the end to the well-being of your patient. Because for the most part, in the TCM, schools, TCM approach is to mainly fix what you find. In other words, a patient comes in, they have a headache, you take their pulse, they do take a pulse, but it's not mine. But you ask them some questions about the headache, and you decide where to put the needles in to reduce the headache. It may be slightly more sophisticated than that, but generally speaking, you have 15 to 20 minutes, or maybe even up to a half hour in some of these clinics where you'll be working, to see the patient, make a diagnosis, treat them, and say goodbye to them. What we're interested in addition to fixing what you find, which of course is something that you would do, is to find out how are you a problem to yourself? In other words, what did you do to create this problem in your life? What else is going on? And then it may have showed up as a headache. I think I mentioned in one of the things that I asked you to read, about what people are coming into your office having on their mind, which is not so different from what you're having on your mind right now if you're sitting here, or I have on my mind as I'm talking to you. And those things matter. So, one entrance into that, in other words, how do we evoke this information that is not going to appear automatically, is to pursue that idea, asking them that one question. How are you a problem to yourself? I think Jamin, one of the four people you heard, he stole all my material, incidentally. But I love him anyway. Already forgot what I wanted to say. He told a story about Dr. Shen, and when a patient came back and said, Dr. Shen could say, "What you do?" And of course the patients are shriveled up in their seat and confessed. But I've never succeeded in imitating him that well, but no, I had the nerve to do it. But anyway, he did it all the time. And when it was necessary, and unfortunately it wasn't necessary too often, but he was a pretty good diagnostician and Chinese doctor. At any rate, I started telling you that you will be equipped to be TCM practitioners by the end of the first year. But that's not where we want you to stop. So in addition to fixing what you find, we want you to find out essentially what created what you need to fix. And that can only come to the patient. What you learn from the pulse, eventually will be able to help you tell the patient what it was. Now, this course was developed through the collaboration between Karen Martin Brown, your manager, director of the school, and Mary Jo Hayes, who is a graduate, former teacher here. And recently, she was the manager of the governing board, or director of the governing board, that more or less oversees the operation of the college. She became very ill and has been unable to collaborate, so that she did choose the people to address you, and Barbara Hammer and Grant Stickley and Leisha Kenner and Jamin Nichols. And there was supposed to be a speaker for each of the 15 weeks that this course covers. Unfortunately, she, as I said, became and is very ill, has not been able to. She was going to be one of the speakers. She's not able to do that at this point, or to help us get other people to continue to speak to you. At any rate, the object was to introduce you to Khan in the first year, at the very beginning of your education here. And the object was to do it in a way that didn't require you to know anything about Chinese medicine, to know where to put the needle or why. And so I've written to you, and longer than anything you probably want to read, which is unfortunately my style. And I mean, unfortunately for you, with using terms that do not require you to know anything about Chinese medicine. So I'll be interested in knowing what how that worked. Today, in addition to what I've already said, I do also have to mention that because of my hearing, and I explained to Shannon, I know she's there today, why I have a hearing problem, but I need people to speak very, very slowly. And I love to talk about the reasons, because that's all about the war and what a hero I was. And, so, if you prefer.
Dr. Hammer, we agreed, Shannon is here.
Oh, good, okay. Well, then I'll let her tell you.
No, Shannon is here. However, we agreed that everyone would give me their questions and then I would convey them to you.
Okay.
Okay. So whenever you're ready, people are going to let me know what questions they have, and then, but continue on, please.
Yeah. Well, I have some questions. First of all, did we in any way reach our goal and to orient you to what contemporary Oriental medicine is? And any suggestions that you have to improve the course, even have the course, which I fully intend to do, but would like to make it the most useful to you or to people who come after you. And so, my question to you is, how did we do? But you could even write that. And it can be one sentence or one word. Horrible. Of course, we pay you to say something like tremendous. But we're not allowed to tell you how much we pay. So, I think we should get to your questions. And then if we have time, I'll tell you a little story. And unless you want me to tell you the story first, why don't you ask your question?
Okay, Dr. Hammer, I'm going to turn the camera around, if you don't mind, so that you will see me. So we have a student who was unable to be here today because of her illness. And her question is, if you had one piece of advice for first semester students regarding diving into this work, what would that be?
I'm sorry. That's a very funny question. I would get a good night's sleep. And a good breakfast. I think that what is very difficult to do, if not impossible, is to have an open mind. In other words, try to avoid having any, which may be impossible. Never tried it myself. Not have any preconceived ideas, but try to leave yourself as open as possible to what follows, so that you can hear what's coming from outside rather than from what's inside. And I don't pretend that that's easy to do, because, or as I said in one of the things I wrote, our minds are constantly going on. There's all kinds of things all the time. We're human beings are born warriors. We are going, if there's nothing to worry about, we'll find something. And that's what we're experts at. So anybody coming into the room and is going to be worrying about something, I wouldn't discourage you from worrying, because that's impossible. But I would try to keep your mind as open as possible to hearing something new. rather than what you may have heard from other people. For example, I discovered Chinese medicine in London in 1971. And I met somebody who was teaching me something I wanted to learn. And she whispered in my ear, finally, that she was studying acupuncture. That was a secret. You didn't say that out loud those days in London. And I recalled, yes, acupuncture, I heard about that before. I had read a small article in the back of the New York Times about somebody traveling through China. Remember, this is in the 60s and 70s. And he saw people putting needles in other people. And I thought to myself, my God, there's still places in this world so primitive. Needles. That's what I knew about Chinese medicine when I first encountered it. And for me, it was more of an epiphany, and it's another long story. That goes back to when I was very young. So I went into that office with this article in my mind, but I had an experience in putting one foot in because I had, from my second year of residency, I've been aware of the fact that all through history, all healing involves the laying on of hands. And here I was studying to be a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, never supposed to touch anybody or even raise your hand. How was I going to do what this epiphany told me, information that came from some other place? And so I searched for about 7 years, looking for different ways, because there was Wilhelm Reich, who worked trying to overcome resistance in people's bodies by essentially attacking them. And I studied that for 7 years and finally came to the conclusion that nobody got better as a result and everybody got worse. So when I put my foot into Dr. Van Buren was his name, office, just 1 foot, and somehow I had this another epiphany that told me this is what I meant when I was a little boy. I was 2.5 years old when I told my parents and whoever else was there that I wanted to be a physician, a doctor. And that's a long story. We don't have time for it. I love to tell the story. So, I don't know if that answers the question, but at least it took up enough time.
Yeah, I have another one coming up. Hold on a moment. If you have one, write it down. Are these 3 different questions?
There's a question on top and then just like a little blurb.
Okay.
And then a question.
So, I'll read this through to you. Can traumas that are unknown to the patient, repressed, ancestral, be healed or released? And the further explanation of that is, I was a teacher at a Title I middle school. I saw a lot of racial issues, poverty, disparities that affected my students' behavior and mental health. Would it be worthwhile? Could a difference be made in our youth by having, say, an acupuncture clinic in a juvenile detention center or prison? So back to the question, can traumas that are unknown to the patient be healed or released?
I would say that's entirely possible. If you have a very, very sophisticated practitioner, somebody who is really an expert at diagnosis, usually, and I think maybe Jam and do that also. He sort of learned it from me. And as you'll see, I hope, that this pulse system, which I learned from Dr. Shen, is a very, very sophisticated system in which you can tell a lot about a person that, you know, there's nothing that a person doesn't really know about themselves, but there's an awful lot that they don't want to know. And the reason they don't want to know isn't because they're bad people, it's just that they don't have the equipment to handle. I mean, they are little children when they're getting these kinds of experiences, and they are not equipped to deal with them, and so the only thing they can do is shut them out. And little kids are very good at that. And so, you know, we end up being sort of twisted mentally, but we survive. And we can even become billionaires. But we may have, you know, terrible damage to ourselves that we're not even aware of, but other people may experience it because we're going to be hurting other people. Yes, to some extent, maybe sometimes to a great extent, that the pulse is capable of picking those things up. As far as the race situation is concerned, I confess, after a lifetime, and I spent 6 years working in a clinic in Harlem when I was young. Lived in Harlem, actually, with another black psychiatrist. Experienced that world, and I could spend the rest of the day talking about it. But in my lifetime, going back, you know, to the mid-20s, and my parents' relationships with black people, and there has been an enormous amount of progress, especially in the 1960s, when Johnson was president. But there is as long a way to go as there has been that, you know, that cut. And I don't know in my 87th year that I'm equipped to say, you know, how do you do this? I mean, how do you get rid of things that are built into you from birth that you hear all the time? It's a challenge to each and every individual born in this world. And it's a challenge, if you don't mind my saying it, to black people as well. Because there's my experience in working for 6 years and living there, and there are just been lockdowns, that there's as much prejudice in every world, including the black world, even against black people. It's a human problem. It's going to depend, in my opinion, on another race. And according to astrophysicists, the human race is not going to last that much longer, partially due to what's happening to the environment. And that's not going to be very long, and not going to be very pretty. And to which, you know, there's just a lot of hot air being expressed, but it's mostly joining the rest of the hot air that's making the environment warmer.
Anybody else have a question?
I do.
You want to bring it to me?
Well, I'm writing it now. I can
Okay.
say it to you.
Go ahead.
Professor.
One more question, hold on, and then Dr. Hammer, we really only have 5 more minutes, but I have one more question.
Yeah, I had looked at his pulse book.
I just wanted, before you ask that question,
Yeah, hold on 1 minute, we have another question that a student's getting ready to give me, and then we have about 5 minutes. So hold on
Yeah.
1 moment.
Sure. I looked in his pulse book, and he has these circle diagrams of the pulse positions, heart, blah, blah. And he has on one page it's Dr. Shen's, and on one page it's his interpretation of the pulse. And I was wondering how that evolution was made, or why his is slightly different from Dr. Shen's.
Okay. So in your pulse book that our student Ian has looked at in the past, you have the pulse drawings, you know, the boxes that show the different drawings in the book. He said he had seen where you have a Dr. Shen drawing and then you have a Dr. Hammer drawing. And he wondered what the evolution was of the change from Dr. Shen's impression to yours.
Experience.
So just years of continuing to do pulses, or?
The the book is being rewritten. It's going to have a whole new set of drawings. What I discovered, it's an 800-page book, and it was published when I was 77 years old. And what I discovered, because I never read it through, you know, to edit, I mean, essentially that book, unfortunately, as it is now, has a certain number of errors. And the drawings are going to be completely rewritten and much, much closer to the truth, because if I had read that book, it would never have been printed. I did not read it after it was laid out, because it is not, in some respects, close to what I've been teaching. And that is because when I wrote the book between 1991 and 1993, and handed it, and nobody was particularly interested in it except John O'Connor and Eastland Press. But he has a partner. His partner is a very TCM person and opposed publishing it. But John O'Connor stuck with it, but he brought editors in over the years, and some of them were Chinese. And the attitude towards Dr. Shen in communist China was they just wanted to slit his throat. So I'm surprised they didn't try. But he had an arrow throat. At any rate, they didn't make it. So in those years, between 1993 and 1999, John O'Connor hired people to edit the book who were basically hostile to the book, hostile to the concepts, the ideas. So in 1999 actually, I told them this isn't working. These people are undermining the book, undermining the pulse work. And so he said, okay, I'll do it. So he edited the last 2 years, and then it was published. When I now look at the book, which I didn't all these years really try, but when Jamin Nichols and Leisha Kenner were rewriting this book, I've come across a lot of errors, a lot of mistakes. And so they're being corrected. I apologize for this. But that's the way it is.
And let me mention, since you are,
Although all the drawings were done by somebody who knew nothing about Chinese medicine. There was, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna mention that recently, for the sake of your class, the current Pulse teachers have all taken an additional training on the errors that they found and have been corrected. So all of the teachers that are teaching now are teaching it the right way, or with those minor corrections. until, of course, the Pulse book finally, the revised version comes out. Did you have, anybody else have a question before we let Dr. Hammer go? We really are out of time, Dr. Hammer. Do you have any last words for our students?
Well, yes, my last word is if I could have another opportunity next week to talk for another 15 or 20 minutes to this class. I don't know if that's possible, but it was more than I wanted to say.
Absolutely.
Do you want to go into your ethics class instead? Or do you have a lot to cover?
They have a quiz. He can just go now.
And come back next week?
It's either up to you. Like, you can have I'm sure they need a break, but
Yeah.
but yeah, he could go into that and then they can just do their quiz and I'll send them home after their quiz. So they don't.
I could.
Okay,
wait a second.
Yeah, 1 second, I'm talking to Shannon. Since you thought this was gonna be the last class.
Yeah.
I was thinking perhaps after the quiz,
Mm-hmm.
we could call him back
Or
And-
they can
and give him a few moments and then,
I mean, he can go now after if they have a break and then finish it and then have their quiz. It's a 6-question quiz and then they can just be done after that.
okay, Dr. Hammer, if you can give us 10 minutes, the students have a 10-minute break. If you can give us 10 minutes and then come back at the top of the hour and stay on the call, then we can give you that extra time instead of coming back next week.
Fantastic.
And then the students have
What do
another,
I do?
the
I
students
just
will have
stay?
a quiz after your discussion. They'll have a quiz in another class, but Shannon's willing to give up the beginning of that class for you to discuss with your
That's
final.
great. Okay. So I just stay where I am?
You may. It's a 10-minute break, so the students won't be here, but
Well, tell them that, their fathers didn't need a break.
all right, we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Touche.
Good. One of the people I forgot to thank was contributing to this course is Shannon. She actually did the
Here
greatest
she is
contribution.
here.
And I just want to thank her in your presence. I really had some thoughts more about what we were talking about before in terms of race and color. And I have written, there's an article published, one of my articles, in October and November, in a very popular Chinese medical journal called Acupuncture Today. It's not a very good journal, but a lot of people read it. And so I've been publishing it for the last, God knows how many years, 50 different articles that nobody's ever read because they were all published in, rather erudite journals. So I decided to publish it in this one, which everybody reads, but is otherwise, except for what I've written, totally worthless. So I would suggest it because it has to do with fear. And basically, we're always afraid, basically, of what is unknown. And what's unknown is other colors, other religions, whatever is different is something that we automatically fear. Other languages. That's why you have all these different nations that have been so close to each other, each from a different origin. They're Hungarian, or Polish, and they're French. They speak a different language, German, and they've been trying to kill each other for 2,000 years. And they're still trying, if they could. So, at any rate, I'll leave that to you and ask you to look at that article if you can. It's easy to read. The IQ, it's, have to have it over 100. Yeah. Okay. So what I did want to tell you, and I'm not sure we'll have time to finish it, is that in 1981 I was in China. And we're attending a course by the World Health Organization for physicians in third world countries. There were about 30 of them. I roomed with somebody from Uganda. The reason for having that course, and I think they still have it, is because these third world countries realized they could not afford Western medicine. And therefore, they were looking for some other kind of medicine that was cheaper, easier well, not easier, but cheaper at any rate. And so I was part of that, but I was one of the 2 people in that course of 30 people who had had experience in Chinese medicine, 10 years by that time. And so the head of the course, who continued to be the head of Chinese medicine until he died just recently, at the age of 99, Dr. Chang. At that time, the airport in Beijing was an hour ride. So with this translator, though he spoke English, we rode in the back seat of the car. And he told me this following story. He said Mao had come in 1949. By 1950, he despised Chinese medicine. He wanted to bring Western medicine to all of China. But within a very short time, he realized that he could not do this. He couldn't afford it. There was really only one hospital in China called in Beijing, called the Capital Hospital, which was founded by the Rockefellers, that practiced Western medicine. At any rate, he said that he was a classical, not traditional, don't use the word. At any rate, he came from a long line of people going back 2,000 years, and Mao took a certain number of them and put them in a room and said, look, we can't afford what you do. But what I want you to do is come up and create a medicine that is cheap, easy to teach, easy to learn, and that we can spread very easily throughout China. So they came up with something called the barefoot doctor, which you may or may not have heard of. I have a whole volume here called The Barefoot Doctor. And so that's where TCM started. And he said, you'll call it traditional Chinese medicine. And that was traditional Chinese medicine. It began in the 1950s and spread throughout China. It has become much more sophisticated in the years that followed, but was basically not the medicine that Dr. Chang, who was the person who was telling me this story, that he had practiced, which had been around for 2,000 years. So I just want you to hear what I heard in that 1 hour drive in 10 minutes. And he said that, he was continuing he continued to head it for all of China until just a few years ago, and I said he died at the age of 99. I have a wall hanging that he gave me here on my wall. And that is TCM. That's where it began. It is not, in fact, today, they don't even use the term in China. So what you're going to be learning that's called TCM is very valuable to you, since it's considerably developed over the years. But it is not classical Chinese medicine. And there is an article that's been written just recently.
Click on, yes, we can, thank you.
So I think we probably all have to go. I will send Karen Martin Brown, Shannon, the link, or I even send you the article that's written by the man who now does more or less China has done in the last few years is he has gotten rid of TCM. He's reintroducing the classical. He's trying to build up the image of ancient China. He's trying to relate the Communist Party to ancient China, and that is sort of sweeping through China today. And I'll send you this article that you can read by the man who is now the head of Chinese medicine in China. And you can see what he has to say, because he more or less says it in a slightly different way. There's a lot more to say, but you all look very unhappy.
Now, we probably have another 10 minutes, Dr. Hammer, if you have more.
Another 10 minutes?
Mhm.
Well, let me see what I've got. I mean, I've sent you enough material to read, probably take you the next 3 years to read it. Was there anything from that material or from what we talked about today, or what other people have been telling you, that you want to ask me about? Any other questions? And I'm going to look at my notes to see if I have anything
The name of
else.
the article about fear is, he didn't say the name of it.
Dr. Hammer, can you tell us the name of the article about fear? Is that the one that's a 2-part article in acupuncture today?
Yes. Yeah, the name of it is Qi and Astrophysics Converge.
Thank you. Dr. Hammer, I think it'd be helpful to expand a little bit in the next few minutes on awareness.
On awareness?
Mhm.
Well, the next time that you cross a major highway or a road, look in both directions. The reason I say that is because if you live in the United States, the traffic is going to be coming from the left. But if you go to England, the traffic is going to be coming to the right. And if you're not aware, you might have time to regret it. So, what, can be more fundamental than being aware of yourself and being aware of whoever you're going to encounter, however you measure them, what your life may depend on. Definitely, as far as practicing Chinese medicine, that is what it's all about, because what you're going to be seeing and hearing is not just what's in front of you, what you want to be aware of, but you're going to be listening and be aware of subtle things that people don't even want you to know. And that's, what the pulse is about, too. So really the whole practice of medicine, in fact, think of something that if you decided to become a cop or whatever you wanted to be in life, and when I was young, one of my uncles wanted to be a policeman in New York City, and my grandmother, and this is during Prohibition, preferred that he go and apprentice himself to my other uncle, who was the head of the Jewish mafia in New York City.
Oh, God.
That's so, awareness is central to everything. It's awareness of you're listening to me and trying to be aware of what I'm implying, if not directly saying. You're, trying to figure out who the hell is this guy? What does it really mean? What's he trying to brainwash us with? So, I'm not sure if that answers your question, but that is, everything that you're doing diagnostically is part of awareness. But really, everything you do has to do with awareness. How aware are you?
Thank you very
And of
much.
course,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I can't hear you.
I didn't mean to interrupt, I thought you were finished, go ahead.
You're speaking too fast for me. Can't understand you.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I thought you were finished and I was gonna come.
Well, I think they're finished.
Anyone else?
I have a question, Karen, but I don't.
But if there's more about awareness that you want, that I'm not addressing, please ask.
So I have a question about when,
One moment, please.
when people release, when you're doing the pulse and you're finding out this information and you don't wanna like bombard them with the information, but you wanna slowly peel that onion away. Has he ever had an instance where someone released a lot and ended up having more issues, more conditions?
Okay. So we have a student who has asked, when you're taking the pulse of a patient and through that pulse and perhaps that questioning, you find out more things about them that they haven't shared with you, and it starts becoming more of a release for them. Can that be a problem somewhat where they release too much
At one time,
that one time?
like they reach too much at once,
They release too much at once and it causes more of a problem for them than
more issues, more conditions.
more issues, more conditions.
Well, first of all, most important is that if you find something on somebody's pulse, you do not say, I think. What you do is you say, your pulse tells me. And it's important because anytime something very sensitive to people, even if they don't particularly want to know about themselves, is a matter of somebody else's opinion, that's automatically a criticism. And so it's important for you, in order to communicate to your patient, that it is some aspect of your diagnosis and not your opinion. You don't, for example, there's a position that is called cotton quality, one of the ones that is controversial at this point. And that position would frequently tell me how sort of stuck a person was in their life, how much they were repressing. But when I would communicate this to somebody, I would say, your pulse tells me that you may feel a little trapped or stuck in life or something. And generally, I've had no exception. Every single time that person was relieved to be able to hear that somebody else, someone else's awareness, and they're not criticizing them, they're not attacking them, they're not doing anything, they're in a healing mode. But it is not something that I would ever say to a patient, I think you're stuck. Now, your pulse tells me that, you may feel a little trapped in life or stuck or something, not sure the right word. And I've never had a situation where somebody didn't open up, and in so doing, and having this secret shared with another person, that created a bond we broke it. Because for the first time that person has shared it with another person, nothing terrible has happened, and maybe they told me this because there may be a possibility of doing something about it. So I would say the people I became closest to in terms of patient-physician relationship, about which incidentally I wrote a book. I forgot what I started to say, but at any rate, you can tell me. But being able to pick up on something on the pulse in which you communicate to the patient in a very neutral fashion. And I'm sorry, I forget your question originally. But I'm not sure. I hope I've responded to it appropriately.
The student Sarah said perfect. She perfect answer. Thank you so much. So we thank you, Dr. Hammer. Our time is up, but we thank you so much for your time and dedication, of course, to the college. And I'll just let everybody say thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.